Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today, where we will be talking about herbal support strategies for the menopause journey. This is such an important topic for many, many women, as we have an opportunity today to get to know our herbs and how they can help ease our menopause symptoms. My name's Kim Fancher, and I will be your host today. We here at Positive Health are so honored to be able to bring experts in to share some really great information on menopause topics like this one that are important to you. So now I'd like to get us kicked off. I am thrilled to introduce our guest presenter, Kay Sidahmed. As a clinical herbalist, she will be able to help us understand beyond the this herb for that approach of how clinical herbalists match clients with herbs and address menopause as well. So thank you so much, Kay, for being part of our Positive Health webinar series. I think we all would be interested in hearing about your career and how you got started in this space, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us.
Sure. Well, thank you, Kim, for the introduction. And hello, everyone. I'm really grateful to Kim and Colette for inviting me into this space. So, in short terms, how did I get introduced to, or how did I come around to work as a clinical herbalist? I sort of naturally, grew up in Germany, was my grandmother was my caretaker, and she basically raised me, and she was a child of World War One and a young mother during World War Two, and she just, didn't have much, and she needed to take care of herself and her family, and so she went out and foraged and foraged. She was very knowledgeable about herbs and plants growing around, and so I had no choice but to go with her since she was my caretaker, and so that was something that's always been in my life. And when I had children, I sort of turned back to this again after having had a career in agricultural sciences, and then several, maybe like over a decade ago, I pursued this path to turn this into a formal career. And so here I am today. What we will be doing today in this short time together, this is meant to be really a more like a broad overview of what clinical herbalism is, and also of how we can herbally support the menopause journey. We don't really have the time to go into like a lot of detail, but it's more like the idea is to maybe give you a different perspective, or maybe you hear something and you are aware of some things that happen with yourself as you are on this journey, and you have a different approach maybe to framing this, and also to framing the idea of herbal's approach. So I'll start talking a little bit about in general about what is clinical herbalism, just very broadly, and the guiding principles, how I practice and most of my colleagues do. And then I'll go into how I frame herbal support strategies for the menopause journey. I shared just very briefly a little bit about the differentiation when we herbally support people in the menopause journey, whether they are taking or having a hormone therapy or not. And then I'll go into some examples for particularly brain fog and sleep, and mood and weight support. And then there's hopefully enough time for you also to get some questions going. So let me get started with clinical herbalism in this day and age. Basically is the intentional interweaving of three sections. First, there is the traditional herbal healing knowledge and wisdom, and it would be actually very unwise of us to not reach back to all this knowledge and wisdom that our human ancestors have acquired in all corners of the world. In some cases, this herbal healing knowledge goes back to several hundred, if not thousands, of years, and all of this still informs our work as clinical herbalists in this day and age. The second one is including cultural and bioregional practices. And by cultural practices, I really mean, like, let's say if I work with a client and that client, I'll always get a feeling for what is the cultural background of this client and how meaningful is that cultural background to this particular client. And maybe there's a way that we can identify certain medicinal plants, be it as supplements or as food, as medicines, that we can include in this approach. And then the bioregional practices, referring to where we live, what is our actual ecosystem, what medicinal plants grow around where we live, and how can we include those maybe in a meaningful way. And the third being the tools and findings of modern science. This is, of course, incredibly important in this day and age, and we are lucky. There's still not a whole lot of research happening with regards to medicinal plants, but there is some, and there's some that is very, very useful. And if not, there's also, I mean, there's always good science and bad science. I've been in science forever, and you know, you learn how to understand what is useful and what isn't. And sometimes the message we get from science is also, well, this scientific study is not really useful for our practice at all, but there's a lot for us to learn from this sector, for sure. So let me talk about how I reframe the guiding principles of clinical herbalism. We go way beyond this herb for that approach, and there's no judgment here. What that means is you probably all may have been in the shoes of saying, oh, well, I have XYZ symptom. I wonder what kind of herb I can use for this. Or maybe somebody talked about an herb and you asked the question, well, what is this herb used for? What is it good for? And there is some validation to this, but we go way beyond this. And how do we do this? First and foremost, we're supporting the individual human. So we're never treating diseases or conditions. And that, just let me make this very clear, right? We're not practicing medicine. That's just very important. And we're never just looking at particular signs or symptoms, but we're looking at the entire human. And with regards to menopause, we're looking at, well, what does this human right now need? And we're supporting this rather than just going for how can we support the hot flashes or how can we support the sleep. But the question is, how can we support these areas for this particular human being? But basically what that means is we're matchmakers, we're plant-human matchmakers, right? So we're matching the right plants with a particular human in this particular time of their journey. Plants and humans both have energetic profiles, and that is something we mean on a very physical level, but also on a very subtle emotional, spiritual level. Some of my colleagues lean more heavy into it, some more lightly, but this is also in the background. Physically, just a quick example, if you think of like having a cut or a wound, and this is like very inflamed, and we ascribe this to being something hot and burning. And so if you would want to give herbal support, you would look for a plant that can give some relief through cooling activity. And so that is sort of something each plant has and humans have overall, but also in particular organ systems or tissues that we're supporting. And so we're looking at that energetic balance as well. Kinship and co-evolution. What I mean by kinship is basically inviting us to take a step back from this health food store grocery aisle filled with bottles of herbal supplements, of tablets and capsules, and basically remembering actually what we have here is a plant, and these are living beings, and we're working with those. And why do we work with those? Because we humans and plants co-evolve together. Meaning, so if we think about it, what these herbal, we call them constituents, the biochemical makeup of plants that have medicinal action in humans. And the plants produce those actually to protect themselves from attacks of viruses or bacteria or certain animals like a deer nibbling on them, right? And our human ancestors have, depending where in the world they live, they grew up ingesting these plants either as food or also for medicinal purposes. And so over time, our cells have adapted. We have receptors in and on our cell membranes that can hear certain messages coming from biochemical molecules. And so we have adapted to basically have cell receptors that can actually hear these biochemical messages and either lock or unlock certain pathways that then lead to the effects that these plants have in our bodies. Sustainable, ethical herb sourcing is incredibly important, especially in this day and age of market spaces overflowing with many different offerings. And unfortunately, a lot of them are not from sustainable and ethical and also quality sourcing. And by ethical sourcing, I also mean how are the humans who are harvesting these plants and processing these plants treated, how are they paid, how are their working conditions. These are all important considerations in our practice. The pillars of well-being, I'll talk about that in a moment. Incredibly important in our work. We always look at supporting the whole human. And then last but not least, protocol safety. We're highly trained to always consider possible herb-drug interactions. If people are on pharmaceuticals and certain medications, there can be certain interactions. There can also be certain herb interactions. So we're trained to look out for these. So the pillars of well-being is, I call it the pillars of well-being. Some of my colleagues give it different names, but basically what this is like, in its essence, what is really important to our entire well-being. So we're not starting an herbal protocol without addressing all of these pillars of well-being. They're always part of our bigger conversation. And just to name them what they are, so there is nature connection, sleep, nutrition and digestion, movement, stress balance, and social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And they are not, there is no hierarchical order to them. There's no particular order. I view them all as very important. I named nature connection first because in this day and age, in the area where I live, I find my clients struggle the most with this aspect of really finding meaningful nature connection. All of these are interconnected, right? And you're probably very well aware of this. If we're stressed, our sleep goes out the door, or if we're not sleeping well for whatever reason, then that heightens our stress the next day. We don't eat well. We don't feel like going out, and we're not great in the social realm. Interconnected and what I call the synergistic effect. So with synergy, I basically just mean the whole is always greater than the sum of its parts, right? So meaning all of these come together and flow together to create an overall sense of well-being. So how can we approach the menopause journey with herbal support? And everyone has a little bit of a different approach to that, but there's a bottom line to it, and I'm trying to digest the bottom line here. So first and foremost, for me, really important is it's so easy to get lost in these really challenges and discomforts of menopause and kind of forget the bigger picture of that this massive transformational event that happens on a physical level, but also on an emotional level, also gives us the opportunity to create transformation in all areas of our lives and sort of rewrite our life story and maybe explore a path forward that we haven't explored so far, or we're kind of dreaming of and just never had the guts to actually do it. So there's this aspect of menopause is just, I think, is incredibly important. When I work with clients, we're setting short-term and long-term well-being goals. So short-term may really be, somebody may really be struggling with sleep, and so we're looking at all these different aspects of how can we support somebody to find better sleep. But we're also looking at long-term goals, meaning we're supporting beyond just the transition time, right? We're looking ahead, really. This is second half of life support. What happens? What changes does the menopause journey cause that we then need to be mindful of throughout the second half of our life to really support our well-being? So this is something I basically like to summarize this as that meaningful menopause really tends to the acute discomforts and challenges of the transition, while also preparing the way for holistic well-being throughout our second half of life. So if we're looking at how do I go about and build an herbal support formula for somebody, and there are some common building blocks, and those are listed here. So nervous system support is a really big one. That is actually the biggest one. If they are all important, but nervous system support is the first one I and my colleagues tend to when supporting herbally during the menopause journey, because it affects all of the other organ systems. Cardiovascular support is very important. This is also the support beyond just the transition. Bone support, similarly, we all know this, the change in our hormonal makeup, the change or the lowering of estradiol causes weakness or vulnerability to our bones, and so we need to take particular care of this. And then other needs. So nervous system support, things not exclusively, but we're addressing sleep, stress, mood, cognition. And herbs that do that incredibly well are the so-called adaptogens and nervines. So nervines in general are, adaptogens are nervines as well. Nervines in general is any herb that has an effect on the nervous system. Adaptogens is a term you may have heard that is kind of like has been quite in for a few years now. It's a category of herb, very broadly speaking, that support our bodies in adapting to times and situations of heightened stress. And that stress can show up in certain organ systems within our body. It can show up also, always shows up in the nervous system, but also manifests in different physical aspects. And then what I mean by other needs is really like what is really going on with somebody right now in this moment. So there's maybe hot flashes or night sweats, particular hormonal support if somebody is not on hormone therapy, maybe pain support if painful joints is an issue, tissue dryness and atrophy, especially vaginal tissue, but also other tissues that could be something to address. And weight could also be something we would need to address or would want to address if that's a choice of a client. So as I mentioned before, let's talk a little bit about differentiating herbal support for people who are on hormone therapy and who are not. And I think the most important message here is hormone therapy and herbal support are not alternatives to each other, right? So I'm not a fan of this term alternative medicine or framing herbs as alternative medicine, because I don't think they are an alternative. It should be a collaboration, that in my ideal world. So what that means is, bottom line, we want to view and consider hormone therapy and herbal support really as standalone tools, right? Each of them can be a very valuable tool for any person. And then review their pros and cons with regards to our unique individual situation. And if appropriate and desired, for you and your situation, then we may decide to combine them. Or you may decide to say, I just go with this for now or this for now, and maybe combine at a later point. So just what does this look like, or what can this look like? And this is just very, very, very broad, right? There's much more to it, but in general, right? Herbal support with hormone therapy, what I mentioned before, always supporting the nervous system, we're always supporting the cardiovascular system, so meaning the heart health, the blood vessel health that includes blood sugar control and blood pressure support and blood lipids. And we are always looking at long-term bone support. Now, if somebody that is with hormone therapy. If somebody is not on hormone therapy, then same thing is true. Plus, we may be adding in some targeted hormone balance support. We have a lot of herbs where we say they can support as hormone modulators, but some of them we can specifically bring in if that may be adequate for a client and if hormone therapy is not happening at this point, or was just not chosen or cannot happen for somebody. And we add in some extra liver support. Liver support is also very important on hormone therapy, because basically a well-functioning liver means our body's innate detoxification system works, and the excess hormones that our body doesn't need are being eliminated. There's other elimination routes that we take here, like for example, also through bowel movements or urination, but liver support is very important. And so without hormone therapy, depending on where we are in the menopause journey, that could play an important role, because we may have some buildup of excess hormones that our body really doesn't know what to do with or need. And so that is kind of an important aspect to work with. So let me jump in at this point, because I try to make this as practical and useful for you as possible, and to really dive into some areas and talk about some herbal support examples. So given everything I've said before about how we're really supporting the individual person and we're being matchmakers of plants and humans, right? This is just very important for me that you remember these are just examples and they don't apply universally, and they are not necessarily the right formulations for you and your situations. I've sort of like extracted and brought up some herbs that tend to always kind of show up and we work with often, and there's certainly for every area a certain group within our materia medica we work with. But what I'm showing here, especially the grouping of herbs together, that may very well not be the right kind of formula that you would need, just to have that in the back of your mind. So let's start with brain fog support, right? I certainly have my own share of brain fog. And so the first thing, what we do is there are certain areas to consider. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is just like some that somehow always mostly show up. And that is just something we want to look at in an individual. So the first thing to really consider is that we're not making this up, but there are menopause related brain changes on actually the structural as well as the brain energetical level happening. Maybe you're familiar with the work of neuroscientist Lisa Mosconi. I'm sure there's a link somewhere to her work on the Positive Health website or the app. Her work is really, and her group's work is groundbreaking with regards to that. I highly encourage you, if you're not familiar with her work, go and find her TED Talks or her podcast she's been on, her latest book on the menopause brain. Very, very incredibly well written for the layperson and very meaningful. So cognition, focus, memory, these are most likely areas we want to consider. We want to consider blood flow throughout the body, but especially to the brain as well. Inflammation always shows up in everything we're working with. And this is also just important for me to clarify, right? Inflammation, just remember that inflammation is a reaction of our body to foreign invaders as viruses or bacteria coming in or other toxins. So it's a necessary reaction of our body, and we wouldn't survive without having inflammatory reactions in our body. The inflammation gets in the way when there is constant inflammation happening or too much, right? And that can then also cause this cascade that also gives us this challenge of brain fog. Elimination, as I said before, in this case specifically, we're looking at liver support and colon, intestinal, bowel movements, supporting this. Stress adaptation, we all know this, when we're extremely stressed, thinking clearly is really, really hard. Sleep and stress are so closely related. And then mood, all of these are really interconnected, but these are some areas to consider. And so could an herbal formula look like when we're specifically addressing brain fog? And I could talk hours on every single herb alone, so this is really just a quick run through, but just to name some. So this gotu kola is a wonderful herb that comes out of the Ayurvedic healing tradition. Traditionally, it's been used as an herb to support people in meditation, so to really enhance focus. And I really love working with it for this. But it also has, this is why I love it for menopause support, it also supports connective tissue, and it has a supportive but also moistening effect. So I love to bring this in when I see somebody, for example, with challenged with dry tissues, vaginal dryness, and brain fog. That's something I really love when I bring this in. Bacopa is another herb out of the Ayurvedic healing tradition. This is a wonderful focus enhancer, helps with memory function, supports that. It's actually in India traditionally has been used, and I heard it is still used and given to school children to really focus on their schoolwork. And believe it or not, I do have a formula at home that I made up for my children where there's also bacopa in there that they get on certain times during the school year when there's like some AP exams showing up or particularly days of long tests coming along. Lemon balm is one of my favorite herbs. You may even grow it yourself. And if you don't, if you have a garden space, a balcony pot, or even a windowsill, this is a great herb to get your hands on and grow yourself. It is, one of my teachers called lemon balm the kid on the playground that gets along with everybody, and that's exactly true. It is incredibly relaxing. It has wonderful subtle mood enhancing qualities. Schisandra is one of these adaptogens that I mentioned before, this group of herb that helps us in adapting to situations and times of heightened stress. And Schisandra in particular also is very supportive of liver health. So if you remember what I said before about proper liver function and elimination, so that's where Schisandra comes into play, together with also having very calming effects on the nervous system that help us to focus better. And then rosemary, also one of my favorites, right? A kitchen herb. So you can see, right? Rosemary, even cooking with rosemary, throwing that regularly into your foods and soups and spicing with it. Rosemary enhances circulation throughout the body, but also in particular cerebral and brain circulation. And then here are just a number of other herbs. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but a number of other herbs that I love to consider and bring in when brain fog shows up, but each and every single one of them always also has different actions and activities as well. So let's look at sleep. Same thing, right? Areas to consider. So you see some of these things now overlapping, right? Stress adaptation is this fancy term, HPA axis, and I wrote underneath what it means. It basically refers to these three glands: the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the adrenal gland. And very broadly, basically what happens is if we are in a situation of stress, right? Let's say that a saber-toothed tiger is attacking us, then that axis kicks in, and it kicks in a path of action that at the bottom line makes cortisol flow through our body, which increases heightened alertness. Our heart rate goes up, our heart beats faster, our digestion shuts down so that the blood can be transported to the parts of our body like our legs and our muscles there, that we can actually run away and run to safety, right? And then once that danger is over, once that saber-toothed tiger has disappeared, we can take a breath, we can slow down again, the heart rate slows down, digestion goes back in, everything restores back to normal. Now, in our day and age, we are somehow in this constant situation of constant stress, and we're constantly having, due to maybe overstimulation or a lot of things that are pulling at us at the same time, and especially during menopause, we reach a time in our life where it seems like everybody wants something from us. And so can easily be heightened cortisol levels. And so stress adaptation is something that we really want to consider when we're talking about good sleep. Hormonal imbalances, pain, mood and mental health, indigestion, cardiovascular challenges, they all can get a little bit in the way of sleep, and we may all need to consider what is going on with an individual here. Daytime nervous system support. I put that there with an exclamation mark because it's really, for me, important that clients understand when we want to support sleep, right? Of course, we can do something like, let's have this tea or let's have this tincture that helps you right before you go to bed, or even melatonin, right? If we're working with melatonin to help us sleep. But supporting the nervous system during the day, particularly to prepare it so it is relaxed when we get to the point where we actually want to lay down and sleep, is incredibly valuable and an important aspect of how herbal support can kick in. So here is a possible formula: passion flower for these circular thoughts when our brain doesn't shut down and we keep ruminating through this to-do list. This is also a great one I love to work with for daytime support to prepare us for a good night's sleep. Again, you see lemon balm, right? The one that everybody loves to play with. Chamomile, a wonderful relaxing herb, especially if there's also stress and nervousness and anxiety that manifests in some tummy aches and belly pains and indigestion. Skullcap is a wonderful relaxing herb, especially if anxiety shows up. And then hops is one that probably you've heard about quite a bit. The thing with hops is there's also valerian. I didn't even list valerian here. So I'm always a little careful with hops and valerian. They both are what we call in the herbal world more herbal sedatives. They're not comparable to pharmaceutical sedatives, but they do have sedative action to the point of that I usually advise people when they take it to not drive or operate any other machinery that could be potentially dangerous. But what my colleagues and I have seen quite a bit is that in some people, hops and valerian can have the opposite effect. So not necessarily stimulating them, but actually making it harder for them to go to sleep. So I always like to take those out of a formula and have them individually and have people experiment around with them a little bit and see how they react to that. So if we turn to um, mood support, again, we know if you look at the areas to consider, of course, our mood is very much interconnected with and dependent on the way we sleep, how we experience stress, how much stress we experience. Inflammation, again, shows up because what that means is that there could be molecules that aren't meant to be in our bloodstream and that aren't meant to be in our brain, and they can cross the blood-brain barrier, and then that also affects and has a physical effect on our mood. Gut health with that regard is very important. You may have heard of that molecule serotonin when we talk about mood, especially when we talk about depressive moods. It's an important molecule that plays a role in mood well-being and health, and 90% of serotonin is actually found in the intestinal lining. So supporting intestinal lining and gut health plays an important role. Circulation in general, again, elimination shows up, hormonal imbalances that need to be considered, and again, the menopause-related brain changes overall that all sort of affect this whole picture of if we're having some mood challenges. Here's a possible herbal formula for this aspect. Yeah, you see lemon balm. I love lemon balm, and it shows up everywhere because it does so well in gently relaxing and really very subtly but gently and kindly lifting our mood. It's kind of this really nice neighbor or friend who just puts this supportive hand on your back and tells you, just breathe and it will be well, and I'm here for you. Albizia or mimosa, you may know the mimosa tree, this beautiful Japanese silk tree, it's sometimes called, these beautiful fringy purple pinkish flowers. A wonderful, wonderful, I love working with it, especially if depressive moods are showing up. Shatavari belongs to this class of adaptogens that I mentioned before, and I love working with shatavari in support of the menopause journey. If it's appropriate, it is one of these herbs. A lot of our medicinal plants have more like a drying aspect to it, and so we always need to make sure we create an herbal formula, especially as we are transgressing through menopause. If dry tissues and drier tissues shows up, we need to make sure we have a balanced formula where we don't have just drying herbs only, but we also bring moistening herbs in there. And shatavari is wonderful for that. It also comes from the Ayurvedic healing tradition. It supports, in general, the nervous system in a more calming, but not sedative fashion, but in generally just more calming, and it gives some very gentle hormonal support as well. It comes actually, as I love my preferred way, I add it to a tincture formula, but I also love working with it in powder form. And then you can add it into yogurt and oatmeal or soups, and it doesn't have a strong taste to it, so it's very easy to work with. Holy basil or tulsi, some call it an adaptogen, some call it a nervine. There's some geeky professional discussion going on about that, but a strong nervine, a strong mood supporter that can really help to even things out a little bit, especially if we experience a lot of this roller coaster mood going on. And burdock root is something that I would always throw into or another herb that supports the liver. So burdock root is a strong liver support herb that will always show up in any of my mood support formulas. Some others to consider down here, St. John's wort, probably something you've all heard about with regards maybe to supporting depressive moods. And I love St. John's wort. Also, it's a very strong nerve repair herb. St. John's wort is known to can interact with some drugs to the point that it basically can render drugs ineffective, and also hormonal treatments ineffective. And so that is just important to know and to consider. And so it's always important to have somebody who's trained in this look over and make sure that it would be appropriate to take. The last two, rose and hawthorn. Hawthorn's also in the rose family. Those two, I love bringing them in for, particularly if the emotion of grief is showing up. Those are wonderful for that. And then the area of, if we're looking just of weight, and if there is like challenges or unhappiness with weight going on. So areas we're considering here, we're looking at blood sugar and blood lipid support, hormonal imbalances, again, digestion, inflammation, addressing all of this, addressing all of the proper elimination support, liver function. I didn't list gut health here, but it should be on here. Stress, adaptation, sleep, and mood, all of these play incredibly important roles and affect also of how our body may add up, build up some adipose tissue and hold on to it more at certain times rather than others. So what could a support formula look like? Cinnamon is great blood support, as well as blood sugar and blood lipid support herb. And I love working, again, food as medicine approach, a high quality medicinal organic cinnamon sprinkled on a latte macchiato or a cocoa or any kind of into the yogurt or oatmeal. I love working with it in this way, but also include it in like a tincture formula. Artichoke is we have a lot of research from artichoke with regards to blood lipids and cholesterol, which becomes important in menopause as our estradiol goes down. Our body tries to, reach for these building blocks of estrogen, and cholesterol is one of the important building blocks for our steroid hormones. And so our body kind of holds on to more cholesterol than it should. And this is one of the reasons why we often see our cholesterol, especially our LDL levels, go up during the menopause journey. So artichoke is a wonderful herb to work with here. Holy basil also has, next to the nervine, support blood lipid and blood sugar support. Milk thistle is a really great liver support herb for proper liver function. And then hawthorn as well is it strengthens the blood vessels and also gives blood sugar support and blood sugar modulation. Some other herbs that usually show up in this area, and you can see down here, if you look at like garlic or turmeric. So a lot of these are also great ones to consider to simply just include maybe more in your cooking, in your food preparations as well during this stage of our lives. So this is what an example for what a custom herbal formula for a client could look like, right? So there could be a daily tincture that has some adaptogenic actions. You see nervous system support is big here, liver support, heart, cardiovascular support, and nerve support in the tincture form. And additionally, a daily tea that there's my lemon balm again. There is some brain fog and some focus and connective tissue support, but there's also nettles and alfalfa, and specifically in a tea to aid with some bone support. They are both rich in minerals, and minerals only extract if we extract the plants in a hot water infusion. So working with nettles or alfalfa in tincture form has other benefits, but we don't get the high mineral content that we want if we specifically look for bone support. And then we would, as always, we would add, maybe a sleep tincture if needed. Always include food as medicine, and always support and always constantly look at all of the pillars of well-being. Just some practical considerations real quick here. So herbal formats, as I just mentioned before with the tea with regards to nettles and alfalfa, right? Teas, tincture, powders, capsules, pills, they're not interchangeable. So it really matters of what format the herbs come in and how we combine that. And I'm always, my colleagues and I, we always work in formulations. There is a point in time for giving simples, individual herbs, but usually we love working with them in formulations, also for safety reasons. Sourcing matters tremendously. This should read, don't buy on online or third-party online marketplaces, right? That's important. You always want to buy from the manufacturer itself. Don't buy in grocery stores and chain pharmacies. I mean, there are like health food stores who really carry trusted sources, but it can be quite wild out there with regards to navigating the marketplace. So that is sort of something to avoid. Always whole herb over single constituents. And then remember, what works for your friend may not work for you, and what works for you the other way around may not work for your friend. Food is medicine. I've mentioned that several times. So easy and important. And then really get to know your herbs, right? I mean, if you hear these names, you may have heard some names today where you're like, I have no idea what this living being looks like. Look it up, right? And start making this connection and building this connection. Grow your own herbs if you can. As I mentioned before, there are some that happily thrive on a windowsill if there is enough sunshine. And then last but not least, work with a clinical herbalist, right? We're here for a reason. And we're educated for a reason. And just if you're interested in that, so we are not licensed professionals, and that simply is a result of health politics in this country that have happened over the past 100 years. It does not reflect at all, say anything at all about our professionalism and qualification, but it makes it harder for you to, how can I actually identify somebody who knows what they are doing? So some pointers to look for: the American Herbalist Guild is sort of our mother organization, where we also keep each other ethically in check, where we keep each other in check, that we're continuously educating ourselves. So you want to look for somebody has a membership there. Somebody either has a bachelor's in herbal sciences or a master's, like I do, in clinical herbal medicine, or if they don't have that, there are many other high quality educational routes to take from. You just always want to look for somebody who went to a school or learned with an instructor who is a registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild. So thank you so much, and I'm happy to receive some questions.
Okay, well, that was truly awesome, Kay. I want to thank you for this great presentation. There's so many wonderful points that you made, and so happy that you could actually dive into some examples of some of the most common menopause systems, like brain fog and sleep and mood and weight management. So that was all very insightful.
Great.
I had a question, and I know someone else posted one out here that is similar. The question that was posted is, how long should we expect for these wonderful herbs to work for us and begin to see a difference?
That is a great question, and I love that you actually asked that. So the bottom line answer is, I always tell people working with herbs needs patience, right? They're not pharmaceuticals that kick in overnight, although depending on what it is and what we're working with, they can. So like a sleep formula, or like as simple as a passion flower tincture, may very well show its effect right away. And we have herbs that, like when my family has a cold and somebody has a fever, we have herbs we work with in acute situations, right? But if we're looking at, the bottom line is, herbs are not treating diseases, but herbs are supporting us to nudge our body back into that balance so that we can promote our own healing and well-being. And so, how much out of balance are we in a particular aspect, an area of our life, right? And the more out of balance we are, the longer it may also take, right? So if let me say it this way, if we're working, for example, with adaptogens and nervous system support, it always also depends on what else are we doing. When we're addressing all of these pillars of well-being, it can be overwhelming to work with all of them at once at the same time. So we usually start and choose and which are the ones that we can easily use. A good adaptogen blend can show its effect in a matter of a week or 2 weeks. Usually we say 2 to 3 weeks is something we're really looking at. Something like, if we're particularly looking in blood sugar and blood lipid support, that of course always has to come along with changes in nutrition and changes in our movement routine and all of this. This can take longer. This can be a month. This can be 2 months until maybe something is measurable on the charts, right? So it can be anywhere from a few days to a couple of months, I would say. And it always depends on how committed we are to all of this. That's an important aspect. And how are we doing in all of these other areas of our well-being?
Yeah. So, I mean, the question that came to mind for me is, how important is consistency? And it sounds like it's very
Very,
important because
yes,
it does take time. It's not a
yeah,
light switch. It's not something that
no,
you
no.
take and see immediate results.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there, as I said, there for sure is, right? I mean, if you have we have wonderful, like, let's say, the cold and flu season is upon us, school started again. I'm waiting for the first one to come home with, something. Then we have wonderful herbs that do the trick, let's say, immediately. But if we're talking a substantial support like this, then yes, it takes
Okay.
commitment and it takes time, for sure. Hmm.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Another question that came is they weren't sure if this was going to be addressed today, but just wondering, how do you manage menopause symptoms with accompanying comorbid factors like diabetes?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And that is sort of also what I meant with sort of like supporting beyond just a transition. And a lot of what I said in the weight category falls really also a lot of times into that. So when we're talking about type 2 diabetes, we're addressing blood sugar, we're addressing blood lipids, we're addressing cardiovascular health. And so a lot of that certainly is always is very much being addressed there. And as I mentioned, I briefly mentioned that, right? The conundrum with cholesterol level typically rising as we go through menopause. That's a very broad and difficult topic, and there's a lot to say here that we don't have the time here to address. But for all of these, we are certainly equipped to give support in many, many different ways. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I don't see any other questions out there for you, Kay. So I guess we can wrap up here. And if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide.
I'll do that.
I'd just like to mention to everyone about some of our upcoming um, webinars that we have. We're at Positive Health here. We like to leverage the power of webinars and podcasts to help communicate a lot of this amazing information to people, to help them out with their menopause journeys. So coming up here this month, August 28th, next week, we have our mindfulness mentor, Skylar Grissell, joining us again for part of her series. And this one's going to be on nurturing self-compassion. So please join in for that. And then also in September, we have a wonderful webinar that will be facilitated by Fatima Karim Merje, and she's going to be, showing us how some menopauses can be helpful in our menopause journey, and how yoga can really help with menopause. So you can go out to our positivehealth.com/webinars page to sign up for these webinars. And then we also have our next release of our podcast series coming up at September 4th. And this one is going to be on bringing mindfulness into our menopause journey. And we have Cheryl Jones, who will be joining us to talk about that. And also, by the way, she'll be doing a 4-part series in October on mindfulness and menopause. So you'll see that in our webinar site as well. But to look at our podcast series, simply go to positivehealth.com/podcast to view this and all of our other previous episodes. But you can also find them at your favorite channels: Amazon, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And then I'd like to mention, if you're not already a member of Positive Health, we'd like to encourage you to join. And you can go out to our positivehealth.com site and look for the membership there to join and make that change for the better. This pilot program is available for free until December 31st. So if you're not already a member, please join or pass this information on to a friend who you think might benefit from it. And then finally, I just want to mention that we have a menopause journey community, and it's a wonderful place to go and just informally chat about your experiences or hear about others' experiences, and also to find some really cool resources that might be helpful. And so you can email us at info@positivehealth.com, and we'll help you get started with that community.
Awesome.
Okay, with that, I'd like to say a big thank you to Kay for helping us out in our webinar series and bringing this just very helpful information about, how we can really look at herbs as a way to help ease our menopause symptoms. Kay, I know you spent a lot of time putting this together, and it's so much appreciated.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Colette. And just, final word that I really appreciate what you do at Positive Health, because you truly embrace tending to all of these pillars of well-being, and you do it incredibly well and meaningful, and this is so much needed. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And everyone, please have a good day.